office manager at Desklight. Our mission at Desklight is to empower people through learner-centered, equitable, and crave-worthy learning strategies and tools with the best of the best learning leaders. So Inspiration Hour is our way of sharing some of our favorite learning leaders with you. We host an Inspiration Hour the first Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Central Time. So we'd love to have you back for future Inspiration Hours as well. Some of our past guest speakers have included Christian Long, Chief Growth Officer at Think Learning Studio, who shared how to spark curiosity to create aha moments anywhere. And we also recently heard from Kate Benson, who shared ideas for how to use learning as a benefit for professional associations and organizations. And then I'm going to drop a link with some of our past Inspiration Hours so you can check those out. We record these so you can refer back to them later. And then next month, we're going to be hearing from Kelly Ryan Bailey, who is a skills innovation and transformation expert. And she's the host of the podcast, Let's Talk About Skills, Baby. So be sure to join in for that on Thursday, June 1st at 11 a.m. Central. And then, like I said, I'll leave some links. I'm going to leave a link so that you can subscribe to our newsletter if you're interested in that. And then you can view the past Inspiration Hours. And then we're also interested in learning from more people. So if you would like to be an Inspiration Hour speaker, I'll also leave a link where you can let us know that you're interested in that. And we would love to hear from you as well. And then also in the chat, feel free to drop any questions that you have as this presentation gets going, and we will do a little Q&A at the end. So if you have questions anytime, feel free to drop them in and then be thinking of questions for us to chat about at the end. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to the CEO of Desklight, Erin Huizenga.
Thanks, Sarah. That was such a good setup. Appreciate it. And it's so good to see all of you guys here. It's a great diverse group of folks from lots of different industries, and of course, especially education and learning. And I just love introducing our speakers. And this month we've got Manny with us. And Manny, you and I have known each other for probably like 5 to 7 years now, something like that, right? And Manny's been at MSI for quite some time. He comes to the work from a background in architecture. So really interesting in terms of his attention to detail and love for craft and design. And on top of that, he loves people. It's just everything he does, just like magnificence around love for people and really wanting to bring design to all in terms of its accessibility and equity. And he really believes that everybody can be a designer. And so I think that's really special and cool considering his background in architecture and craft. So with that, we're really excited to hear what he's going to share with us today about the Fab Lab and everything he's doing at MSI. So Manny, take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me and thanks for inviting me. It's really exciting. I see one familiar name. How you doing, Mike, on the screen? So that's really, really great. But thank you, Erin, Sarah, for inviting me to present a little bit of the work that we do here at MSI and maybe a little bit about my background just to kind of set up why someone from an architecture background is now working at MSI. So there's a reason, and so we'll get to that here in a second. But again, thank you for having me. So I think we'll just go ahead and jump in. Yeah. All right. So everybody can see the screen. Big bank of 3D printers. I hope it's coming up. All right. Good. Okay. So I am the Director of Creativity and Innovation Programs within our Education Department at the Museum of Science and Industry, Chicago. The image here you see is a printer farm that we set up for an exhibit hands-on experience that we had done a few years ago called Make Shop. And so amongst the other things that we'll show you, we are a department that works across all other departments, both in programming as well as helping with exhibits. And so this is part of that short 5-week program that we help design and run, facilitate. We're able to give over 12,000 people a design hands-on experience within 5 weeks during the spring break a few years ago. And so that's what this image is here. So let's go on. Let's see. There we go. So a little bit of my journey, how I landed here. It was is kind of an interesting, like I think many of you, interesting path to find my way here to Chicago and find my way to MSI. And so I'm from, I grew up in, let's see, here we go. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the high desert environment, the sort of dynamic light and weather patterns and topography had a big role, a big impact on me. This. If you've ever been to New Mexico, if you've ever been to Albuquerque or Santa Fe, certainly northern New Mexico, it's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful environment. Of course, growing up there, it felt like you were just isolated from the world and everyone wanted to get out. But as you grow older and start to appreciate things that are happening around you, you realize how beautiful and how wonderful it is. And so many things that really brought me either peace or inspiration. One of them being storms that would come across the high desert plains and roll through our neighborhood. Had a big impact on me. This was my peaceful moment, although it's pretty chaotic. The best part of this is just smelling that smell coming off the desert as the rain started to fall from the creosote and chamisha bushes and grasses. And so that had a big impact and a big role in just seeing that process happen in front of you was really inspiring. And then combined with that is the Sandia Mountains, which is this grounding element. And I often refer to this as my mountain. Every day growing up, this is what I would see looking east as we headed into either Albuquerque for school or for work or whatever. And so this also had a really important impact on me of having this, this really solid element that would then change over the day in the course of time. So in the morning to the evening, as you can see here, where it starts to glow sort of watermelon red, that also had a very big impact on me. And just watching that change over time. And I think it had a big impact on certainly my architectural practice and thinking about how to use light and shadow was very important. And then just really for my soul is just a really important thing. And then let's talk a little bit about concerts and live performances. And so as a young man, I really loved to go to see bands perform, but I would always tend to look up into the rigging and the lighting and the production and how all that came together, and then the teams that would be have to pull this within hours and have this amazing experience. And so while my friends were watching the band on stage, I would focus on the rigging and then the control boards and just imagining like all this coming together and to create this cohesive experience that everyone didn't even think about. They just sort of enjoy the show. And I like to think about the things that are happening in the background or the thinking to bring this all together, as well as the production itself. And so one of my favorite bands, Rush. So I want to just give them a shout. Not everybody's favorite, but certainly mine, and very influential in growing up. Another thing that really influenced me was, of course, the soccer, not only as a sport, but all the different aspects of it. So playing, being a referee, even at a young age, and certainly coaching. So that idea of teaching and inspiring and motivating others to around a common goal. And that had a big impact on me as well, and really sort of led me to this idea of being some kind of teacher, some kind of educator in my future, even though at age 11, I maybe wasn't thinking that far ahead, but I knew I loved doing this and really wanted to continue in some form or fashion as an adult, but not quite sure what that was going to be. And then, of course, I had this love of architecture and of buildings, and again, not quite knowing what was all involved in it, but as I started to learn and educate myself and go to school, really had this love of form and the sort of integrated work that's required to bring a beautiful structure to life or a beautiful space. Really love that. And so all these different elements coming together. And one of the things that really inspired me when I was in graduate school, especially, is that, or undergraduate school, was having to learn from people who didn't love the act of teaching. They were sort of in between projects or jobs, and so they would come in and teach a studio, versus those that really loved not only the subject, in this case architecture, but also loved teaching others about it. And so so that really that was important for me. That, you know, I decided at that time that I wanted to share this thing I loved, which was architecture, with others, especially young people. I just wasn't quite sure how to do that. But through graduate school and volunteering at local schools, I started to sort of develop a knack for it, and then moving on into a practice, which supported that work as well. So both the practice and the education fed each other and were inspired both fields or both elements. And so that led us to developing a really robust and successful program of teaching kids about STEAM content, but also just the idea of design and how important that is into our everyday lives. And so we're able to develop a really great program. This is a picture at the Albuquerque Academy, our summer design studio, that we had a number of different classes throughout the day, including planning, engineering, architecture, that we would offer to students. It had a hiatus through the pandemic, but they've restarted that program this year. And so I'm just really proud to have been on the ground level starting and developing this. And it's become one of their most popular courses in their large summer camp. So anyway, so that love of teaching, that love of design, this is a place where I could combine those two passions, and did this for a while. Got the attention of the Chicago Architecture Foundation. Again, a little nod and shout out to Mike, who was my predecessor before I came on board there, of a position that opened up to manage their teen programs. And so I took a sabbatical from the practice and came to Chicago for 2.5 years, and just built on the good work of people before me, and then created a new team of people, and developed a really terrific series of programs, especially our Saturday in the Studio program for teens. And this is a picture here of a group. And the project on that day was called Rapid Deploy Shelters. And so we were at the IIT Crown Hall space, which they were a really terrific partner and allowed us to, so it was very inspiring to be in a Mies building and teaching kids about design and its ability to solve challenges and solve problems. And so you see some of the prototypes here of that day, as well as bringing some professionals to work with the students, so act as those mentors and help them crafting some of these projects and guide them through that process. And so part of that journey at CAF was helping develop their design studio. And so we're part of a team that I led to pull this together using an old exhibit space off of Jackson and Michigan streets. This is at the ground level. There used to be a corner bakery also in that area, but this is where the big city model was for the Architecture Foundation, just within the inside atrium. And so we were able to take this old exhibit space and then turn it into a really dynamic space where we could hold programming. And so next slide. So we had a gift from Lego of the Architecture Studio product, which was an all white and clear brick kit. So we had about 500,000 bricks to play with, which was really fantastic. So we developed programs to not only talk about STEAM careers, and all of that is very important, but also the idea of using design and creative approaches to thinking about not only the impact design, how you can use that, but that process was also important. And then combining the technical thinking with some aesthetic ideas, or how to express their ideas. And so here you can see where they would build a Lego model, and then we would take a photograph of that, trace over that, and start to develop a narrative or a story, and that the students would then, at the end of the program, would talk about what their ideas were. But the beauty of this is that they didn't start off thinking about a house, or they didn't think about a museum. It developed over time as they were working on form and structure, and then how to then creatively imagine and create a story around the structure that they developed. So there's a few of these pictures here. One note, this young man in the larger picture who's sketching on the wall was one of our students that came in and ended up going into structural engineering. So we have a number of those stories in these pictures, and really proud of that legacy that we started, or continued and continues to this day. The Architecture Center does really great programming. So, but this was an example of some of the work that we did, and then using even just simple materials and the idea of using scale figure to develop, again, a story or a narrative, but starting off by just creating abstract structures or abstract objects. And then when you start to incorporate people, or scale person in this case, then it starts to change the narrative and the story. And so then students would study that, write a quick brief or a quick story, and then share that out with the team. And so this is just going from using a Lego tool to simple paper and glue, but still being able to create a really dynamic, interesting story behind that creation. And then here was a summer program. We worked with a group out of Toronto we built a quick site model of Northerly Island, and then the students, after visiting the site, got to develop projects that they were inspired by, visits out to the site, and then with a group of designers helping them to develop their own designs. And then you see here's the day where we're presenting. Lynn Osmond here in the background was there for the presentation, as well as some other staff. But that was a really terrific use of that space as well. And so the students had a really lovely summer, crafting models, building the site model, rendering it, and then building their own individual models, and then be able to talk about their designs, which I think is a particularly important element of the work that we were doing, that all the designs came from them, and they say all of them were easily able to talk about their work and share with their guests and colleagues. So, and then looking at both the design process that the Architecture Foundation, Architecture Center uses, and then off to the right is our own iterative or innovation process that we call it. And there are many forms or many examples of this out in the world. But going from the work that I was doing at the foundation to the work I'm doing at MSI, this is a carryover in terms of the thinking and the approach to programs. And so again, very similar, but taking a little bit different track based on the work in the Fab Lab and our approach to solving challenges in the programming that we do. So you're here to talk about or hear about the work we're doing in the Fab Lab. So let me just jump into the work that we do at MSI, just a brief outline of our impact on an average year. I won't go through every bit of data here. I'll let you all sort of read some of and of course we'll provide these slides if you want them, but you can see we're able with a small team to hopefully have it's going to be a diverse amount of impact with the people we engage with, but certainly it's all positive, and hopefully steering them towards an interest in STEAM content. What is design thinking, certainly the variety of pathways that lead you to a STEAM career. That's one of the things that we impress on our professional partners, that we ask them to talk about their pathway as much as what they do. And so we think that's as important and often more interesting to the students and inspiring than, the fact that someone is an architect or a civil engineer. I mean, that's all great, but usually they're more interested in well, how did you get here and how could I become one of these, terrific career professionals. And so that's one of the things we really impress, but also really important is how to think and work and solve challenges and problems like a designer, like an engineer. And so we try to introduce that idea as much as possible. So this is what we do as a department on an average year. To date, my team, small but mighty team, to date, to 2023, this is the work that we're doing, engaging almost 57,000 guests and counting. And that's a variety of large career events to really small, intimate programs with students. Oh, and this is a little video just to kind of give you a taste. Yeah, so this is one of our innovation studios. And here we have, this class is about prosthetics. And so taking students through that innovation process that I had shown you on the screen, but also talking about what are prosthetics, what are the different careers that are involved. And then we let the students actually develop out of simple materials their own prosthetic ideas. Oftentimes students will, and we all, an underlying element to all this is the idea of empathy and its importance to understanding the world around them. And so many times students can talk about, a friend or a family member who has a prosthetic or someone they saw on the street. And so they're starting to develop those connections like, oh, I can do this. I can have an impact on some part of my world that I see either every day or maybe I saw once, but it had a lasting effect on me. And so a lot of the programs that we put together, we try to make sure that empathy is something that is embedded in that. We don't talk about that directly with the students, but we try to get them to think about beyond what their own space or their own world and imagine, like the work that they're doing can have an impact on others, whether it's one person or a whole community or a whole city. And so let's see, and then you can see again all the stats. Like I said, this to date, so we'll expect that to grow as programs start to, or they're either signed or people approach us to do some programming with them. So that's again, like I said, our small team. Fab Lab is part of that team. Whoops. Let's move on to the next slide. Here we go. And so the Fab Lab is one of the teams that I oversee. And so we'll focus a little bit on that. Just really quickly, a background on the Fab Lab. So we are part of the Fab Foundation that is based at MIT's Media Lab. You can see on the map there the scale and scope of labs throughout the world. We were lab number 7. And now there's over 2,500 labs around the world. So it's a pretty extensive network, but we are considered a hub or core lab, not only with our tenure certainly, but the type of work that we do is unique to other labs, and so many other museums or universities will come to us for advice on how to put together a program that's like ours. You can see the floor plan here of the lab currently. Off to the left is our design circle, and then our benches to the back, and then we have a separate R&D lab that where we test equipment, materials. You'll see in a moment here the production side of our lab. A lot of that work is done in there. So we have sort of our public space, and we have then our private or our testing lab. And then so we have a diverse range of programs that we offer, and I'll just quickly go through some of the work that we're doing. I listed 6 different categories off to the side there. So we'll jump into what we call MakeX. Let that load. Here you go. And so the different pictures that you see here on the upper right is what we call our belt board. And then down at the lower left is our project grid. And so those two things work together to help do a variety of things. They help manage a maker space or design space and its content. It's a way to assess the progress of the learner in the space. It helps organize for the instructor the different content that they want to offer, as well as the different technology that might be in a makerspace. Um, and it also provides a way, if the space requires or allows for students to be self-guided in their programs, and it helps support both focused and generalist learners by offering a way to it gives that learner the freedom to, if so desired, to approach and learn the different subjects within the class or within the makerspace. But it also is a way for teachers to organize their curriculum, and it can be over a course of a year, or it could be a course of a day, and everything in between. We've been able to use this. So I'll walk you through this really briefly. So the idea is that you would develop a project or a specific content around this idea of 8 belts, like karate belts. So going from white to beginning to black, independent study or advanced. And then with that, an instructor can break down a particular content into different strata that then builds on one another. And then students, as they move through all those different levels, they reach a certain point of achievement at the end of that. And so if you want somebody to know how to paint with watercolor, you can certainly approach by working backwards, saying, okay, you can do a landscape watercolor, and what are the steps that would lead to that, if that's what you want the outcome to be. As I said, you may have a student that just does nothing but one particular subject. Some of them want to do a learning experience across many different modules, and so it supports that. We also have a grading a solution for if a teacher wants to assign grades, and so we have an algorithm for that that's been developed, so you can assign letter grade if you want. It's a great assessment tool and develops over time, and so it's something you can share with administrators or with parents. We use this for our camps. We train our staff using this. And we even have Fab Lab volunteers, our summer campers. Not only they develop a belt board, but they can come back, and if they take other classes with us a year later, we just bring up their belt board and see where they left off. We use this for community groups. We've used this for groups that have training people in second careers or coming out of the correction system. And so it's a really nice way to then get them to a certification level if they want to. And then it creates a digital portfolio for the learners, so they can then access that at a later date. It's both digital and analog, so you can see at the lower right, student putting a piece of tape once they've achieved a different belt level. We've seen teachers use pull cards. So there's a variety of ways to implement this, but and then we have a training, the MakeX training or professional development, where we teach people how to create their grid, how to create their belt board, how to manage that. And it's all based on the content. So we have our content around, let's say, 3D printing or digital fabrication that we can offer and share, but also we support individual organizations in how to implement or how to incorporate their content into the system. And so we work with YMCA, Chicago Youth Center, Build Chicago, Chicago Public Schools, a variety of other organizations in implementing this. So that's our MakeX program. Let me move on to, I don't want to take too much time. Here we go. All right. So our Fab Lab and Fab Lab, what we call Fab Lab Junior Camps. And so these are camps that are designed around introducing the various digital fabrication technology that is specific to a Fab Lab. So there's core technologies that we teach students how to use. Again, incorporating the belt system here, a student then can decide if they want to focus on a particular technology or different content, or if they want to just try everything. This is a way we use that belt system to manage their learning experience throughout the week. And then every morning there are facilitated trainings and introductions, and throughout the day, then the students are then allowed to go into sort of an open fab mode where they work on their own individual projects. And then we have facilitators and teachers that help guide them through that process. But we're able to then deploy these labs throughout the museum. So not all of them are held in the Fab Lab, but we create these labs throughout different spaces, depending on our, registrations, or if we want to expand. Like this year, we're going to expand into an old exhibit space where we'll almost double our capacity for campers. And they're offered both as a paid camp as well as offering scholarships to students in the community. And then we're going to introduce, and then the Fab Lab Junior Camp is going to be a 3rd through 5th grade camp that we're going to introduce this year. So it's a little bit different approach to making and designing, but maybe not as technical, but certainly using the same principles and the same approach as our other programs. So we have Open Fab, where we open our lab to staff to come in and learn about the technology that we use in the Fab Lab. But not only that, they also are put into our own MSI grid, and so their progress is also tracked over time. But we allow staff members, volunteers, and guests to come in and work on their own projects, whether it's for work or for home. Some staff have separate businesses that they come in and develop products in the lab. They're all trained they start at a white belt and they get trained on how to use the different technologies. And then as they earn more and more belts, they move on to more independent project. And we hold these on Friday afternoons. So staff can come in and spend a dedicated amount of time to work on their projects. Many staff come in and do things for their own work in the museum too, especially our facilitators. Our own president has a belt. Chevy's got her own belt board, and so in laser cutting, and so she has her own name tag that she wears every day, which is really great. And it's very popular, and this is a good testing model too for training adults in the community as well. So we test ideas and test processes here as well. So I talked about our innovation studios. So here, this is where we really directly use this innovation process as a tool for teaching students about solving different challenges, aligning with different careers or different career models. Here again, we use the prosthetics, or this is a studio where we use the prosthetics project. This is a group supported with the Bulls Foundation, and part of this is one of the really important part is to get them through that iterative loop, a couple of times, and then that launch, which in this case is for them to present their ideas to their colleagues in the room. And so we feel that's very important. Not only, again, all of their designs come from within, so they have something to talk about, which is critical. But certainly all the students, in a respectful way, get to hear what different ideas are. Everybody has a good idea. Everybody has something to share with the group. And that launch element is, I think, really important. Many times, some of the projects we have, a story is developed as part of the project. And so, again, it's a critical component in learning, and as well as team building. And so those are innovation studios. They're usually 1 to 2 classes that we offer these to. We bring students into the museum as well as taking the road out for the show on the road, as it were, and doing these programs out in schools. We also work with groups in Chicago. In this case, this is the Bulls Foundation. We also work with a group called Embark, who finds opportunities for students to engage in STEAM content. Again, career pathways are really important, so we embed what the different careers are that go along with the projects that they're doing. So it's not just the project for the sake of the project, but also getting to think and get inspired about what it is that they might be able to do in the future. So again, our job is to inspire our youth and our and families that come through our programming. So this is, again, one way of doing that. So these are innovation studios. So I load up here. There we go. And then workshops and what we call curiosity stations. So we offer a variety of workshops that touch on mechatronics, a thing called circuit building or circuit bending. And so electronics is important, coding. Up in the upper right is a picture of our make shop. And so here we were able to combine 3 different types of workshops into one experience. That's what I talked about before, that printer farm was part of. Down the, so here we have this very high tech, very facilitated, highly designed experience. And then at the bottom right is where we set up for a back to school event and had printers running there outside. People got to pick up a little object and just have a quick conversation about what we do and what digital fabrication is, what is 3D printing, why do you need a 3D printer, what does it have to do with this multi-generational family that you see there that's engaging with one of my team members, and so talking about that connection to that technology, why it matters, should matter to them. And so that's our curiosity station component. And so, like I said, these are just different ways to have a brief encounter, but an important encounter with people. As I mentioned, we're a little bit different in the Fab Foundation world that we don't have people come through our doors as a makerspace, a couple of hundred a year maybe, but our role in the world is to get people excited to then go out to those maker spaces or to seek out more time or more opportunities within their neighborhood libraries, schools, other maker spaces. And so whereas a maker space might have an opportunity to work with 200 people, 300 people a year, we work with, as you saw, thousands of people, introducing them to this technology and to this way of thinking and working and seeing their worlds. And so that's our role in the Fab Foundation. Of those 2,500 labs, that we have a different goal and mission, my purpose. And it didn't start out that way either. At the time, the founder, Neil Gershenfeld, had an issue with the fact that we had this sort of limited access to the lab. We were able to develop over time a model and a way to approach that then we're able to have a bigger, more exponential impact than other individual spaces can have. And so we use our large museum, large audiences, the fact we're in Chicago, and so we try to figure out how do we use our resources in a really efficient but effective way to take this idea or take this technology or take this way of thinking and share it and train people so that they can then have a large impact within their communities. And then we have our production component, which is an important element to the work we do in the museum, as well as supporting other departments, supporting our external affairs group, our exhibits group. And so there's just a few things that we've done in the past. On the right is what we call a card kit, where we then 3D print. These are the draft of the instructions of a U505 kit that we can then 3D print a card that then snaps apart and creates an object. And so that's a really fun and interesting project that one of our facilitators has been developing over the past year. And so we're taking a lot of our important icons and turning them into these kits so then we can 3D print and then share, give as as props, or just they're just fun, interesting toys, but it talks about some of our exhibits. So that's designed, developed in the lab. And so the card there you see, that's the unfolded. So all of that would break down and fold into this card that slips into a kit with a 3D printed sub in this case. The glow badge that you see there was done for another hands-on exhibit called Makers United. And so those are the instructions, all of that, those pieces this is all designed within the lab. And then we produce some of those parts. Some of these parts were farmed out to local manufacturers, but then we're able to, and then you see off to the left, the band glowing, the other picture worn around the wrist with a slap band, but we've been able to use that for a number of different experiences. Project we called Hero Lab for a family day, Black Creativity Family Day, for example, where students, this was before we had our Marvel exhibit, students would build a narrative around what kind of hero they want to be, and then you would wear this glowing band with a little cape. And so, so taking this really terrific model, this 10-piece element, and using it for a variety of different functions within the museum. And so that, again, is all designed and produced in the lab. And then this is a little video, turn on. So we were asked to come up with some ideas for our 90th birthday celebration coming up in June. And so we tested and looked at different filament material and how we could create this. Well, at the time, it was going to decorate a large cake that we were going to have. I don't think we're going to do the cake part, but certainly we're developing these caryatid models that we would then 3D print and display on a table for guests to look at and to take away. And so these are just a variety of different things that we do as part of our production lab. And this is a great way to onboard interns to help with production, help with design of different elements, and then have some kind of but have a meaningful use, not just printing for the sake of printing, but actually having with a goal in mind, which again is, I feel, an important distinction between, a really purpose for architecture and design is, you're crafting this really beautiful thing that will hopefully have a useful purpose, something that will be that works, of course, and but is also beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and very interesting. And so, so we challenged a team to come up with different products, different ideas, or we're asked by the museum to come up with some ideas. In this case, for the 90th anniversary, that's our current project on the boards, as it were, that we're working on. Oops, let's see. Okay, so that's what the Fab Lab is doing, just a few things. There's some other stuff that's going on, but those are kind of the highlights. And so, yeah, I think I'm a little over my time. Sorry, Aaron, but yeah, that's what we do at the museum currently. And like I said, with our small but mighty team, just doing some really terrific work. I'm very proud of them and proud of the work that we're doing. So hope you found that interesting, and certainly here to answer any questions, or either now, or you can certainly send me an email. It's manny.juarez@msichicago.org.
Thank you so much, Manny. I have 4 boys and they're all very interested in the whole STEAM world. And sadly, I don't live in Chicago because all of this looks super awesome, but you've inspired me to see what programs are available near me, because that's just exactly the kind of learning that would be super impactful to them. So definitely inspirational. We did get a question in from Elizabeth. And she said she's curious about, when communicating with leaders who are super excited about the concept of STEAM, what essential organizational or philosophical items need to be considered, or alternatively, what organizational competencies might be necessary.
Oh, gosh. I mean, certainly understanding that it's important to understand the integration of different different elements. I think if you're in an educational organization, that things don't have to be taught in isolation. I mean, one of the things, if I understand the question correctly, I mean, one of the things that I loved about and still love about, let's say, architecture, is all the different facets that are required to let's say, put a building together, right? And you don't have to be an architect, right? You can be a structural engineer, you can be a materials scientist or a designer. Uh, there's so many different things that that are available, and I think if lessons incorporate an integrated approach to how things are taught, math is something that could be taught in isolation, but it's so much more fun if you can use it as part of a history program. And so I think an overall approach is important. And then one of the things that we do is talk about approaches in that way. So if we're working with an administrator as part of a team that come in for a tour of the lab, we talk about the fact that it requires a broad support for it to work. And then here are the reasons why that's important. So from an administrator side, why that's critical, as well as from a teacher side, as well as a student side and family side as well. All those things, if you can pull them together, then the program can be sustainable. And I think that's the other thing that we always impress and talk about, is that we can come in and do a training, or you can do a program for a year, but I always challenge my team with the question of then what, right? And that's always the thing that you should be thinking about when you're doing something, is that here the program is happening, but what's the then what afterwards? And so how do we make and keep that sustainable? We're a challenge with that, and that's not easy, but certainly thinking about that and getting people to understand that that's important is also really, really critical. I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
Thank you. We have some questions rolling in, so feel free to keep adding your questions to the chat, or you can also share them. You can voice them in the call as well if you'd like. But from Mike Norse, we have, did he see that you took feedback out of the design process at MSI? If yes, why? And if not, ignore this question.
Can you say that first part one more time?
Did you take feedback out of the design process? Is feedback no longer part of the design process?
Oh, as part of that, yeah. No, it's still an important part. I think that's part of that iterative loop, as well as the launch component. That's where we ask for that feedback. That's really critical. And the architecture process, it's kind of, it could be an ongoing, right? There's no sort of like off ramp, if you will. And the innovation process that we use at MSI, we added that off ramp to that launch. But we do encourage that feedback to come at that launch period, or that launch moment. And so yeah, no, feedback is absolutely critical. We just maybe we'll have to add that back. Thanks, Mike.
And then we also have, where do you see education in 10 years and why?
Wow, how much time do we have? Where do I see education in 10 years? I hope, and I hope with the work that we're doing, that we this may sound like a really kind of cop-out answer, but I think empathy is, I think, going to be a really important element. I just had a conversation with some friends around education. They're educators, some are work in philanthropy. And I think we all agreed that the idea that people have to put themselves in another person's place, or in another place even, to understand their value in not only the things that they're learning, but their approach to, what is their impact, what is going to be their role in their environments. I often talk about 3 environments that are important to any student, which is their social, built, and natural environments. And they have to think about all those things in a cohesive way. Some may be a little bit more, I won't say important, but they might be important at the moment, right? But all those 3 things still work together at all times. And if we can get students to approach things in that kind of holistic way, I think that's going to be really important and really critical. And then in some ways, it doesn't matter what it is that they're interested in, right? Because they can think about the work that they're doing in a more broad and I think an important way than just focusing on the thing that it is, the thing itself. And so that's why I really appreciate design specifically, in my case, architecture, is that you have to think about all those other things to do your work. If you can just simply just do that for everything that you do, then I think that will be a big step in the right direction. And then I think education will become more relevant for a student and for young people than just kind of focusing on a particular subject. But I think that if we as a museum and the work that we're doing can get people to imagine and think a little bit differently, I think that's going to be really important, because we really can't think about things in isolation anymore. So.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, I have a couple of questions, Manny. The first one is around the belt board. I love that concept, and it ties so well into what we're seeing around skills-based learning, skills-based training, etc. So I'm wondering if you might talk even a little bit more than you did about downstream ROI for the staff as well as for students, and what you're hearing about those sort of skills that they've learned that they know from the experience, and then how does that map to other things that they're doing or wanting to do?
Yeah, so I think educators appreciate the simplicity of the system, right? And it's able to answer a lot of things in a quick visual way. I think many people comment on the fact that it's very visual and easy to understand. And then especially as you see things over time, as they start to change, and the colors and the different fields that are filled in have a direct relationship to what the learner is doing, right? And so sure, day one, everybody's got a white belt in and how to take notes, right? That's not exciting, but I'll ask people to come back in a couple of days, or even by the end of the day, and you start to see this kind of rainbow develop. And in fact, the YMCA that we worked with, one of the first groups was a preschool that we developed a belt board for them in a design space, and they called it a rainbow board. And so students were like, "Oh yeah, that's great." And so the ability to understand it in a really easy way, I think, has been one of the important, I won't say selling points, but people, appreciate that for. I think that downstream, seeing its value, one of the challenges we've seen is that often the champion of that system leaves, and no one sort of trained, someone, to come in to use it, and so it often sort of just fades away because people just don't quite understand it. One of the things that we're trying to do is encourage, particularly community groups who do after-school programming, to train along with the staff dedicated students, or older students within that organization, on using that board, because that bridge mentor, that's what we call them, is as critical or more critical to the success of that program. If we can get that generation using it as well as the educators, because then the vocabulary, the nomenclature, the way they describe the project to each other is very much around the, oh, I'm working on an orange belt on this. Oh, I've already got my black belt. I can help you with that. Or they start to talk about it in that kind of way. And it's not very competitive, although it kind of gamifies things a little bit, but it's not an overly competitive thing, right? It's like, if you've got a black belt, you earned it, and you didn't step on somebody to get that, right? And you also start from zero, right? One of the things my senior coordinator says, that most classrooms, you come in with an A, and then you spend your semester losing that A, right? Or you trying to hold on to it. Here, in this case, you all start off at this sort of bottom level, but that's okay, because as you start to work through, there's nowhere but up to go. So you could, as you earn things, it's just simply progress, right? And you're celebrated for that progress. Whereas you're not losing something. Like, oh, if I mess up on a test, my 100% went to an 80, and and so on. Here, you're building up to a 70, an 80, a 90, 100%, if you will. And so I think that's an important thing to think about. for some students, a traditional educational environment doesn't work for them, whereas this is able to adapt to their learning style or their learning approach, and it can support them, right, by just a simple way of rethinking, what does progress mean, what does learning mean, how is it presented and demonstrated to the world. And so those are some of the things that we talk about with groups, and how that return on investment of time and sometimes money, because there's a cost to the training, what they're going to see after that. Did that answer your question, Karen?
Yeah, it's great. And I just love the belt concept coming from, martial arts, et cetera. And that, like you're articulating, there's the independence to it, but there's the community aspect too. And you're all in it together, and you all start at the beginning and you mentor each other through that. It's just really beautiful on that level also. Yeah. One more question I have, and then Sam, I know Sam has a question in the chat too. I'm just wondering, it's more about CAF on this one. Just how did you work with the Lego Foundation to develop the curriculum, or did you, in terms of like, where did he, there you are. Somebody left, I lost you on the screen there. How did you work with the foundation? I know you said you got bricks from them, but what was sort of the through line of what they wanted to know or learn through the partnership that you had with CAF?
Well, so let's see if I can explain really quickly how we got that really beautiful gift. Was the Architecture Studio kit had a book that was included with that, and it featured, I think, 4 or 5 different firms from around the world and how they might use this Architecture Studio kit in their own work. And one of the firms was Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, whose offices were in the same building as the Architecture Foundation. And so when Lego came and was talking with them, and they were finishing up the booklet, they said, "Oh, you should go talk to the Architecture Foundation. They do programs for kids." And so they came down. We all met. Senior staff met with them in a large room, and they talked about the product. And then they put a box out in the middle of the table, and nobody got up, and it just kind of sat there. And so I said, "I'm going to get up and play with it. I don't care about you all." And so I opened the box up and started spreading the Legos out and building stuff. And then some other people showed up, and I talked to a couple of people about what we were doing. And then nothing. And then a few months later, they sent us a letter saying, "We're going to send you some brick for your program." And then I got a call from the doc a couple of months later, and they said, "There's a couple of pallets here for you." And I went down, and it was literally 500,000 brick just sitting there for us to use. And they said, like, "Here you go. Have at it." And so we did. And so they didn't give us any direction, and we didn't ask for any. We just kind of came up with our own programs and our own projects to do. And so I don't know if any of that feedback later went back to them. We sent pictures and thank yous, and our external affairs department had sent some correspondence back. But yeah, and then the kit's no longer being sold. So I know that the center still has a lot of those brick, and they're using for programs, but that's about it. It was just, we found a way to use them in a really cool and effective way, and there you go.
So cool. Love it.
Really quick, do you have any book recommendations for digging into design thinking? And this will be our last question.
Oh, well, I don't know if it's about design thinking, but there's a book that probably all of you have already read. It's called Range, that came out a few years ago, and I bought for my team. And it talks about this generalist versus the specialist and the importance of that in our world. I think that, in maybe an indirect way, is as important as a book around design thinking itself. That if you read that and take some of those lessons, I think is really a really great resource. I bought for my team a copy for all my team. One of them, they all still reference it, and so yeah, I think I would suggest that.
Thank you so much, Manny, for your time and for the things that you shared with us today. Truly inspiring, and we just appreciate it. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Manny, and good to see everybody. Thanks for joining. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.